Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hello there, it's Dr. Gemma, and this is episode 214 of the newest version of the Cognitive Podcast, and I'm calling this one, are you ready for this? Jolabokaflod at last. Yeah, I got some explaining to do. And I'm just going to stick this in here as an aside. As you can tell, I'm still working with the lavalier mic. And I have finally, in the last part of this podcast, figured out the best way to use it to get no fuzziness and interference. And ironically, it's not wearing the mic. It's when I set it up near me. And this way, instead of swinging the recorder in my hand, which has been causing a lot of the bad background noises, and instead of wearing the lavalier mic against my clothes, which causes rubbing noises and creates static because I tend to wear wool, essentially what I've done is just set the mic up nearby on my desktop, and we seem to be getting the best quality of sound. I'd like to thank you for your patience over episode 213 and this episode 214 as I've been working this out, and thank you for being part of the experiment. I can't keep re-recording these things. I don't really have the time, even on my time off, but I really appreciate your patience as I've worked out this system to get us some better, more reliable sound quality. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled podcast. This episode will upload on December 28th, which means I hope everybody had a happy Christmas, a Merry Christmas if you're American, a happy Christmas if you're on the other side of the pond somewhere, and also a wonderful Yule, had a lovely solstice, a beautiful Diwali, which is one of those things I'd love to experience, and I don't know if I'll ever get the chance, but it sounds like a fantastic celebration. I don't know if I have any listeners who celebrate Kwanzaa, but I hope it was fantastic if you did. And I know there are plenty of other festivals of the solstice going on right now. To my Inuit friend Q up in Greenland, I hope your solstice was beautiful and you celebrated it with the traditional foods I saw. So I hope everybody has simply had a wonderful time. As I record this, it's actually 5:37 p.m. on December 24th, which, what day is this? A Tuesday. If you go to the show notes, you will find them at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com. And you will also find them in our group on Ravelry. And you will see a picture at the top of Captain the Red-Nosed Border Newfie. She's lying on my bed. She was digging too much, and her poor little nose shows it. But it glows, and I thought that was pretty much in the spirit. In the warm thanks department, boy, I have a lot of them. First of all, I have to go back to Sustainable Living, who reminded me about Romuald sweaters last week. Boy, I'm grateful to you for that. Let me tell you, Sustainable. And I settled on the Sweetheart sweater. And I will talk about that more later, but I was trying to go through all my scraps. Couldn't find my scraps. Said, oh, well, there you go. Then I'll just have to make a new sweater. Instead, what happened was I ran into all the leftover yarn from the sweater I was making, I think 2 years ago now, something like that, for Twin Face. I even found a picture of me trying to size it out and wearing it. I had it almost finished. It really blows my mind. But I found that, and it looked so sad and desolate. It was all wound up. It had, yarn sweaters on it and all that sort of thing. And I thought, I really need to use this. I need to get it out of the stash, and it's such beautiful stuff. And I thought, why not? It's scraps now, too, because of her. And now I have it. And I thought, well, it's going to have too much association with that disagreement. No, it doesn't. I looked at it and said, man, I want to make that into a sweater. So I will get down to what the sweetheart sweater is, but it's very exciting. And like all good scrappy Romuald sweaters, I am learning things from it. And the whole purpose of doing a scrap sweater every Romuald is how much I learn. And boy, I learn a lot. Doing the Romuald sweaters taught me how to do stripes, how to change colors better, more effectively, in a more neat way, how to handle all the loose ends, how to design sweaters, how to do fair isles. I cannot tell you, I have learned so much from these over the years, and it looks like the sweetheart is going to be no exception. Which leads me to say that I also want to thank Natty Lady and Metro Rebecca, because I have to tell you, over the last week, the two of you have been the antidote to trolling. Now, I have to also point out, Metro Rebecca, that was one generous coffee, like as in 20 gallons of coffee. And I really, really appreciate that. And I also appreciate your greetings for Romuald. And yes, we were thrilled to have you at CFRX. And I look forward to seeing you at many more of them. Natty Lady, your message to me was just the most moving, kind thing. I have admired you from afar for years, and I was just so touched and moved by your message to me. It's a privilege to know you and to be following you. And what happened about 10 days ago, I got trolled, and I was impressed because it was hardcore trolling. You know, it's interesting because they were going after my politics, and they were embodying all the things I don't like about the politics I oppose. There was violence, there was bullying, really, really interesting stuff. And I got Natty Lady's message like 2 days later, and it really just restabilized me, just reminded me that most of the people in the world are wonderful and kind and lovable. And then, Rebecca, well, that just kind of floored me. I didn't see that, Rebecca, until today, but I can't thank you both enough because you really restored my faith in my listeners. And, the fact that I've been talking about politics a certain way just bothered somebody. And all I can say, to be honest, is turn me off. If it's really bothering you, turn me off. This is a free thing. This is free speech, but also it doesn't cost you anything. So you know what? If you don't like me, turn it off. But I will tell you, you have to be realistic that I am not going to separate out my politics right now, because that is as much a part of me as the what's on my hooks and needles and celebrating Romeo and all that stuff. You really can't have one without the other. And you really should think about that. And you also should consider what I do for a living, and that will pretty much teach you what my politics are going to be. Although I am surprised. I did work in a prison. People usually assume I'm a little more liberal than I am, but in most of the world I'm just considered centrist, to be honest. I'm not considered a raging liberal. It really is a mark that America's gone pretty far to the right, that I look like a liberal. Having said that, I don't want to dwell on that. I really want to thank Natty Lady and Metro Rebecca for your kindness and your generosity and sustainable living. I admire the way you do things, girl. And so thank you also for the reminder that it's time for another scrappy Romeo sweater. In the meantime, I have not yet sat down to do computer work over this break, so I still haven't updated the information thread for CFR 11, hoping I will do that in the next few days. I did do some prep for that today. I started gathering all my gear together to do my work on the computer, because I have a good day's worth of just sitting at the computer and updating and upgrading stuff. And who cares, right? Right. What's on my hooks and needles, you may be wondering? Well, I finished nothing this week. However, in progress, the stash toss suddenly is going really well, because I did find scrappy yarn, and I identified some of it that's very, very old, and it's in fine condition, but my tastes have changed, and I realized I will never use that. So I've been boxing that up, and I may be sending that off to Jasmine Knitmore for the Teach Kids to Crochet and Knit groups that she has going up in Northern California, or I will take it over to the SCV Free Craft Exchange. Either of those is completely possible. But the stash toss for the years at 49 skeins in, which sort of horrifies me, frankly, versus 95 skeins out. So we have about the same difference at the end of the year that we had last year. Last year I had a lot more in and out because I was working on sweaters, and I also had a huge impulse buy on one yarn, Malabrigo Rios, in the color Virgo, because I just loved it. But at any rate, even though I have not gone through as much yarn this year, we have about the same difference between in and out, which is good. I am working as part of Romule on stash tossing and clearing out my bins. And believe it or not, I've cleared out, are you ready for this? 2 20-gallon, I think they're 20-gallon bins. Big bins, you know, up to my knees. Really, really happy about that. One is now holding the fabric that I need to cut into 2.5-inch strips. Because believe it or not, I've accumulated a lot of that. But that's okay, because that's called quilting. And the other one is holding all the stuff that's going to the craft exchange as soon as we have one of those. Meanwhile, what about my projects? Well, the 10 square bag is going along rippingly. The blocks have all been joined for a while, and now I have crocheted up the side panels. So I need to do a liner for it. And, you know, this is the great thing about saving everything like a pack rat. I was going to use some fabric that was meant to be skirts that didn't work out. And instead, I was decluttering the studio study here. And I found a big flannel sheet that my husband was going to throw out. And I said, no, that is a source of great fabric. And I saved it, and it got buried. And I found it and said, oh my gosh, because it's queen size. So that is going to provide the liner. Hopefully later this week I will get down to that. And I'm looking at the bag, and it looks like a diaper bag, so I will probably add like 3 or 4 more blocks as a kind of lid flap. And then I will add the liner to it. And then it's probably going to go in that Etsy store I'm always just about to start. In the meantime, I haven't touched the Lakeside cardigan. It is lying here in a sad little heap at my feet because I really need to sit down and assess it, because I believe I need to do at least 2, if not 4, little squares to finish it. But the rest of it is pretty assembled. So it actually probably won't take that long. I just need to get back to it. I decided not to go back to it because I've been working like crazy on Vestuary 24. I finished the back. I finished the front. I seamed the shoulders. Last night, I did the neckline. It came out great, and then I bound it off too tightly. Grr. Now, I can still wear it, but it's just a little too tight in the neckline to stick your head through. The rest of the time, you don't notice it. So I'm debating whether I take that out. I'm hearing Gigi Knitmore's voice in my head, which is telling me if you don't like it now, you won't like it later. I know Gigi Knitmore's voice, I know. But I'm leaving it where it is right now. I'm instead going to do the armholes and have a good hard look at how much yarn I have left. I think I have more than enough, to be honest. But there are pictures of it before the blocking and in the blocking, and it looks terrible as you block it. But I have to tell you, this is the beauty of wool, because it really seemed too short when I made it, even though it fit all the measurements on my schematic. And I blocked it, and it's a perfect fit now. So yay, blocking. And then there is the Sweetheart sweater, my Romule sweater. You can see the bottom of it because it's a bottom-up sweater, something I've never had the nerve to do before. And it's fun. It's all in metric. It's by a Norwegian designer, I believe. And it's kind of fun. And I thought, oh no, I'm not used to working in metric anymore. I haven't done it in 40 years since I was a science major. And then I thought, what's the matter with me? I've got a big measuring tape here, 60 inches, and one side's metric. Why am I acting like a goof? So as we record this, I've got, oh my gosh, I finished the 5 centimeters of ribbing at the bottom in a 2x2 rib. And the whole tube of the body is meant to be 41 centimeters, which seems long to me. It's about 16 inches, I think. I think mine are usually 13 or 14, but I am going with this as an act of faith. And I'm measuring myself and also looking at the pictures. It looks like it's meant to have a generous body, like a lot of length to it. We will see how that goes. Meanwhile, I did cast on 4 socks with some Ba Yarns La Jolla, and then realized, why am I doing that? Because I have to do the 2 arms after I do the body tube of this bottom-up sweater. So I put that to the side, although it will show up in my Ravelry notes. You can't see it there. I am Gemma D as in dog, W as in walk on Ravelry, if you don't remember that. At any rate, I cast on for the ribbing of 1 arm. And of course, the arms are kind of fast compared to the body tube. So it makes sense to carry the arm around. Sounds like a weird Frankenstein type experiment, doesn't it? But it makes sense to carry the arm around in my little sock knitting bag. And when I'm away from home, just to knit on the arm. And when I'm at home, I'm just sitting there doing the popcorn knitting on the body because I'm past the ribbing now. And I'm a good, in inches, I'd call it like 3 to 4 inches past the ribbing. I'm having a great time with it. I'm listening to books. Meanwhile, on the quilt squares, well, we have 28 finished squares. I just finished another 9. And I started 10 more. And I'm doing a seam a day on them. And it's really just been delightful. I have to take my 28 out and organize them on the floor and see what they look like. But it looks like I'm going for 100 squares based on the size I have so far to make a queen size quilt. That will be a generous queen. However, some news on that. I will probably make more like 110 or 115 squares for the simple reason that not all of them will be a great fit. When you make scrap squares this way, and I'm using the log cabin basic pattern, light versus dark, you often get wonky squares because you're not being real precise in the way you cut and measure. Oh my gosh, that's good. I'm drinking day 12 of the Plum Deluxe Advent Calendar. Oh my gosh, whatever this thing is, it's great. I've got to look it up. You'll see it in a later entry in these episodes. At any rate, I have a lot more fabric to cut up, but it is interesting how fast I'm going through fabric. It's also really rewarding to see this stuff get used up, and instead of throwing away yards and yards of fabric, I'm throwing away the odd square inch at the end of a strip that I just can't use to make anything. So that is just going beautifully. And of course, working on it has been part of organizing and cleaning around the house for Romuald, and I think this is also why I have Diwali on my mind, because as part of Diwali, which I think is Hindu in origin, the whole household is cleaned out and dusted in honor of the deities to prepare a worthy experience to worship in. And I just love that idea. And I've been doing that, and I'll get back to that in the blather, I'm sure. Dizzy Blondes, I have this fantasy that I'm going to start spinning this week. Will I? Who knows? But with things cleaned out, I have a lot less problem with my sinuses right now because I've been dusting and cleaning. So we'll see how that goes. I have a lot of plying to do, so we just have to see. But let us get down to a strategy. Now, the first thing I would say is I am recording using my lavalier mic, which is now repaired and has the sort of furry bit on the top of the mic, which I think is supposed to take care of popping. But I'm wearing an acrylic sweater, and I'm afraid if I wear it too close to my face, I'm going to get a lot of rubbing noises from the sweater against this thing. So I have it clipped to my nice cotton skirt, and I'm sitting rather still. And last episode, you may remember, I had sort of lousy sound quality. It was kind of muffled. That was before I figured out how to use the fuzzy headpiece on the microphone. So I'm hoping this is working better. I did a test run. It seemed okay. Is it an improvement on what I used to have? Yes and no. It's a little bit scratchier, but at the same time, this lets me put the recorder down and the mic is not in motion. I'm not swinging it around my face as I try to talk to you. Back in the good old days of the Prius of Love, when I used to record while driving, you put up with road noise because you people are saints. But also, the recorder didn't move much because I just clutched it in my fingers against the steering wheel. So it's really relatively little motion. So that's what I'm dealing with. I'm looking for better sound quality, and I thank you for riding along with me on this experiment. Meanwhile, I've been looking this week at what taking a break means. And, I really needed this break. As always, I kind of landed on my hands and knees emotionally at the beginning of Romule. And I thought, this means I am really working too hard at something. So I've been kind of thinking about that. And I've realized that one of the things that really helped taking this break, and this is going to sound kind of paradoxical, is last Thanksgiving, this past one in November 24. I declared Thanksgiving on the Saturday before the actual holiday. I just said from here on in it's Thanksgiving, even though I still had 3 days of work before the Thursday. And when I did that, I began to treat everything like I would treat it if I was on Romule, if I had a really big break. And that worked really well. So I did it again. So the week before this, a week ago yesterday in fact, I declared that it was early Romule. And I didn't really commit heavily because I had to see patients. And my patients, it's the time of year and a lot of the other political developments this week. Although I want to make clear, we don't talk about politics in therapy. It's very, very rare. I've had, I think, 4 patients in the last 2 years that kept trying to kind of ram it down my throat. And their politics were not mine. So that actually kind of makes it easy because I just said, look, this isn't about your therapy. Okay, so we don't really talk politics in therapy. The only reason we don't is very simple. Nobody comes to therapy and says, I need help with my politics. People come in and say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. And if they go to politics, they're actually doing what we call catastrophizing or generalizing. Instead of dealing with their own personal issues, they're going to something too big. So, we try to get people, and this is part of mindfulness, to come in and say, when you say you're anxious, why are you anxious? And if someone says, I'm afraid I'll lose my Social Security, you go to mindfulness. You say, have you lost it? No. Okay, so you're predicting a negative future, and you don't want to do that. Stay in this moment. And then the other question you always ask in therapy, politics notwithstanding, is you say, are you doing everything you could do? And, in terms of politics, I guess that's going to political meetings, voting, participating in activities, whatever. But that is anything. Like when someone says, I'm anxious because my child is sick, I say, are you doing everything you could do? Are you helping them around the house? I'm thinking of an adult child, of an adult patient of mine. Are you making sure they have enough food? Are you making sure they get to their medical appointments? In other words, it's always the same. It's always bring it down to your personal day-to-day level. Don't go to giant levels like I hate where the world is going, because that'll get you nowhere. So, during therapy this week, some people were just very down. They're feeling lonely over the holidays. So I had to limit what I did on my break. But that's okay. Every day I did sort of one littler project that's part of my overall Romule plan, and I had been keeping a list. So for 4 days in a row, I actually went through my closet and filled a box of shoes and clothing for give back box, which I'll get down to in a minute, in something I really like. But it was that kind of thing. One day I cleared my closet floor in our walk-in closet. One day I worked on picking up the bedroom because I'd let it get very cluttered, that sort of thing. At the same time, part of my break, strangely, has been clearing my social media, has been just going through and identifying, no, I don't want to follow this, I don't want to follow that. Curiously, it cleared itself because I stopped using it. I've had 2 days where I really haven't been online at all. And boy, was that a good idea. I should make that a strategy because it did something I wasn't expecting. Apart from making me feel better and getting me away from all the noise, particularly the political noise right now, it actually changed my algorithms. That my silence, I think, made the algorithms kind of whack-a-doodle desperate to get me back. So I started getting all this sort of beautiful stuff, nature and all this, instead of a lot of the more, shall we say, anxious stuff I'd been getting. So, clearing social media, and of course, it is the 6-month mark. Every July and every December, I go through everything I have on the cloud. I download it to my 4T drive. I empty my cloud accounts. I get it all out of there. And then today I went over to the bank, picked up my spare 4T drive, and when I fill up the home drive, I will then transfer it onto the safe deposit box drive and take that back to the bank. So that felt really nice, that just clearing all the stuff off the cloud. Now remember, you may not want to do that. It really depends on where you are in life, but I always will have some presence on the cloud because I'm a healthcare clinician, and the cloud functions as a fast pass between our electronic health record and my private recording. I don't know how to explain that any better. Now, I'm very careful not to leave anything like that. That never stays on the cloud. You erase it as you go. But it is a good reminder that periodically, to make sure I haven't missed anything, I go through all my cloud accounts and get rid of everything, or I download it to one of my 4T drives. And I'm doing this mainly because I'm going to retire, I hope in 2027. That's the latest I plan to retire, assuming we still have Social Security, assuming we still have other benefits like Medicare. It has been a hard week in Congress, kids, for those things, but they're still there. So anyway, when I retire, I want to get off totally. I really don't need the cloud when I'm retired. I am just doing it more because I have activities now related to my profession that require me to have some presence there. So it's really nice to clear that out, and it's really nice to feel like I'm doing my job. I'm making sure there's nothing lingering on the cloud around my work. And meanwhile, of course, like I said, I've been cleaning, I've been running the Roombas, I did the servicing of the Roombas. Now this, you're kind of going, when are you taking the break, Gemma? But it really is a break, that it really feels good to just purify things. I'm beginning to understand that logic of the people celebrating Diwali, that the world feels better when I unclog things, when I get rid of excess, and when I unplug. Now, meanwhile, I've been talking about computer safety and online safety recently, and I want to refer you to two accounts. I follow them on Instagram. I'm sure they're present on other platforms. Both of these people talk about Google, they talk about Android, but I think they primarily talk about iPhone and iOS. But these two are worth following, and that is, one account is called Tech Girl Jen, as in Jennifer, all one word. And the other is Let's Do This, all one word, L-E-T as in Thomas, S as in Sam, D as in dog, O, D as in dog, I, S as in Sam. There may be two S's at the end. I'm not sure. But these two people talk a lot about making sure your tech is configured for security the way you want it to be. Recently, they've both talked about how not to be tracked via your phone or your tablet. Now, that's an interesting issue for me because I'm out in the wilderness a lot. I hike. I run by myself on trail. And in that community, we do hear about people who died because they couldn't be tracked. They fell off a ledge into a ravine. And believe me, in Southern California, we have those. And we have ravines nobody has ever gotten into, way back up between the mountains, And it concerns me because I don't really want to turn off my tracking on my phone. I do on my tablet, however. So I'm going to give that a kind of careful, thoughtful comment. Like, you might want to turn off that tracking. However, in case of an emergency, it is not a bad thing to be trackable. I'm reminded of my Australian friend Mel, who came to visit years ago and told me that in Australia at that time, they were giving really low-cost phones to elderly people because of the tracking ability, that they wanted to make sure if an elderly person collapsed and nobody was around, they could be located through their phone. Okay, kids, look, I'm 64. I'm not that elderly, but it is a point worth making. So I would just say, in terms of tracking, go look at Let's Do This and Tech Girl Jen. I follow them on Instagram, but you can probably follow them in a few other places. Oh, shoot. Well, the knee injury. Yeah, this is really weird. My balance has changed since I've lost all the weight. One of the things that's noticeable, I now walk on the insides of my feet as well as the outsides. I walk in a more balanced way. This means a lot of my shoes are hurting me, and I'm sending them off to give back box. What can I say? Fortunately, I have a lighter pair of running shoes that I bought at the same time I bought my most recent trail shoes, which even I thought were a little too heavy for the job. And I am going to switch my insoles and probably go down to Roadrunner Sports in Encino and let them redo the fitted insoles on that, because my balance has changed. So the knee is taking a long time to heal, but that kind of injury does. It's okay. This means that I missed the jingle jog, which I don't feel too bad about. Because that worked out in a strange way. Instead, I went down to TSA. You know, the security people, when you go through an airport security line in America, I forget what it even stands for, Transportation Safety Authority, something like that. Anyway, I thought, why not? Now, you may remember I renewed my passport, and I thought, I used to have global entry, but I haven't been traveling internationally too much. So I thought, well, I'll get TSA, and I'll think about getting global entry, because it is really nice when you have those things and you go through security. Global entry is very nice when you go through customs in certain countries, I have to say. You know, my passport, they said, 4 to 6 weeks. And everybody I've checked with, 4 to 6 weeks. Try 5 days. And I thought, what? How did that happen? Now, it's true, I got to do it online, but they're still saying 4 to 6 weeks. So I thought, okay, I think I know why, but let's go see how TSA goes. So they said 3 to 5 days, which I have to admire. Try, I don't know, was it about 7 hours? Why is this? Well, I don't know if you realize this, but for my job, I'm routinely reviewed by the Department of Justice and I think the FBI. Okay, and I've had security clearance to work in a state prison. And every few years, my board makes us redo this. It was said to me this week, does your board know you do a podcast? Kids, my board knows what I had for breakfast this morning. So, you know, I have to say, yeah, I'm pretty sure my board knows I do a podcast. I'm not worried about it for the simple reason that a podcast is not considered any form of therapy. And like all Americans, I have the right to freedom of speech, and that has nothing to do with my job. By the way, they know about it too. In fact, they listen, and it's kind of really interesting, the feedback I get. But the important thing here is, I've got fast clearance rate, I suspect, because of this, that it's really easy to look me up. It's really easy to find out, I'm a clean customer and all that. So it really was nice, because I went down to TSA. Now, you may remember, I think I said this before, I tried a few weeks ago, and nobody showed up from TSA, which annoyed me. So I went to a different location, and they were just fantastic. They were inside an office depot in La Cañada. And it was one of their managers, and she was very well trained. And it was very funny because she entered my information. She went, wow, you come up really fast. And she looked at me funny, and I said, I'm a healthcare practitioner. And she laughed. She goes, oh, okay, so you get reviewed. And I said, sure. And by the way, it should be that way. I don't consider that a violation of privacy. I used to treat exclusively kids. And we do not want predators to be treating our children. We don't want predators in sensitive jobs. Some of you are kind of cringing and getting the reference there. But it is important. So I get reviewed. And that's just part of what I do for a living. You've got to sort of roll with that. And it has this weird advantage, apparently, that I get fast passports and clear TSA fairly quickly. So that was very nice. So I did that instead of the jingle jog. And my knee was still a bit swollen. Today it feels good. I told myself I would try to run on Boxing Day, and I will see how that goes. But you can see, under I'll shoot in the show notes, my upcoming race. The next one is the Cupid Dash on February 16th. I need to put some links in for those guys in case you want to run with me. I'm only doing 5Ks, so you actually could come to these and walk them and have a great time. Meanwhile, on to the fluffy books. I'm reading all over the place. I've been reading and listening to Georgette Heyer, so I'm still plowing through Lindsay Davis's most recent book in the Flavia Albia series, Death on the Tiber. It really depends which computer I'm holding in my hands when I'm reading. But I'm liking Death on the Tiber. I think I've said this before. It's a little more complex. It harks back to earlier books. And one of my listeners has said she thinks that may be the end of the series. I suspect as well. At any rate, it's pretty good. It's not one of my favorites. However, in Georgette Heyer, I finished The Quiet Gentleman, which I was listening to, and I didn't like it that much because it's one of her earlier books, and the lead character just keeps stupidly endangering his life to a point where you want to call it the stupid gentleman or the carelessly risk-taking gentleman. It's an okay book. But I moved on to Sylvester, and I just finished it today, in fact, and I've enjoyed it immensely. It's one of her longer books, and it has a sort of streak of adventure in it, as well as romance. And the two characters quarrel all the time, the two who are supposed to fall in love, and they get themselves into it so deep, you kind of go, how are they going to fix this? It is a lot of fun. I'm now looking at Cotillion, which I think is one of her earlier books. But I'm not too big on The Quiet Gentleman. I enjoyed Sylvester. Something I really like, well, I had to say it sooner or later this year, like I did last year, givebackbox.com. Obviously, that is all one word. And the problem with givebackbox.com is you got to really dig around on that link to find the links to Kohl's. However, let's do it slow. Givebackbox seems to be an East Coast thing, I think a Northeastern thing, and they have the kind of collection boxes there on street corners that I'm used to seeing from the Salvation Army and Goodwill here in Southern California. For the rest of us, you can take your stuff to Kohl's, that is the department store, Kohls. So you go to the givebackbox.com link, and you're going to have to click around, but sooner or later you're going to try to find the link that gets you to the page where it's actually Kohl's page, and it tells you how to use them to do this. Essentially, what they're trying to do is they want to recycle all those cardboard cartons that we all get around the holidays from Amazon and other companies with gifts in them. And they also want to do this to get used clothing and shoes. And the great thing about givebackbox.com compared to places like Goodwill, they do not put things into landfills. Instead, they send it to fiber recycling places. That's why I'm using them. But also, nice to get rid of those boxes in the garage. So you box up your used clothing and your shoes, and you seal it like you're going to mail it. You just tape it. Then you follow the link at givebackbox.com. You got to really search for this baby to get to the page about Kohl's. You're going to follow that link, and it'll ask you some information, like why are you returning this? It's Kohl's returns page, but it will default to donation. And you give them your email and your home address, and then they will email you a QR code. So you take your box and your QR code to the returns desk at Kohl's. And they will often say, is this for Amazon or for Kohl's? Say Amazon or say Give Back Box. They don't know what Give Back Box is, by the way. Most of the employees don't realize this is even happening. But you give them the QR code, they scan it, and automatically they print a label for Give Back Box. And you put it on the box, they put it on the box, and they take it in the back. And I asked about this last year. They pile it up on a pallet, and when that fills, they put it on one of their trucks, and they ship it to the East Coast. And it goes off to Give Back Box. So this is really nice. And they also give you a discount card, one for their Sephora shop, it's 10% today, and one for 20% off the whole store for about 5 days. So this is a pretty good deal. You get a discount, you get rid of some used stuff, and you get rid of the old boxes. I did 4 of them. I'm really glad that's over. Meanwhile, put a lid on it. It is time to give you the secret recipe for redundant tomato sauce. Now, as I tell you this, you're going to hear a grinding noise in the background. That will be all my Italian relatives rolling in their collective graves, because this is about the most un-Italian tomato sauce out there. But it works. First, you need a slow cooker. I'm listening for the shrieks of outrage from the great beyond, but I'm not hearing them yet. I use 2 cans of organic tomato sauce. You can also use chopped tomatoes for this. It'll work just fine. Depends really on the flavor you want. I use the little cans, I think they're 16 ounces or 12 ounces from Thrive Market. I get them by subscription once a month. And then you take a pound of ground beef and a pound of ground pork and as much ground Parmesan cheese as you like. I'm Italian, that means a pound of it. And here's the part where everybody screams, a brick, that is an 8-ounce brick of cream cheese. Put this all in the slow cooker on high for about 4 hours. All day long, you're going to nosh on this. You can pour it over other foods, or face it, you got 2 pounds of meat in there, you can just eat it as ground beef and tomato sauce. If you eat bread, put it over bread or dip bread in it. If you make pasta, throw it on the pasta, whatever you like. This is one of those things that I make a vat of it, and I let it sit around in the kitchen, and as I'm puttering during Romule, I will go in there and just scoop up some of this and slurp it down. If you're keto, this is terrific, I have to tell you. But even if you're not keto, this goes over things very nicely. Okay, let's get on to the tea tasting, shall we? We are on days 7 and 8 of the Plum Deluxe Advent Calendar for 2024. Oh, these were 2 good ones, I have to tell you. Day 7 was one of their feel better teas. If you have a sore throat or a cold, this is so great. So ginseng herbal. It is red rooibos, ginger root, cinnamon chip, and molasses spice essences. I am not a big fan of molasses in my tea, and one of the problems with the calendar in 2023 was I felt it had too much molasses flavoring. So far, they're doing really well. I'm at day 12 in my private life, and they have not been overloading us with molasses. But I have to tell you, the ginseng herbal, this is one of those ones. You should have it around the house for the winter. This will just make you feel better. You won't be overwhelmed with the ginseng. Now, the first time I had it, I was. However, I think they've changed that formula a little bit. My guess is they've kind of upped the rooibos and reduced the ginger a little bit. But this is really good stuff. It's good to drink anyway. It's a spicy, lively sort of tea. But if you're not feeling well, this is going to help. The smell is lovely. It's got a ginger aroma, just is going to make you feel better. Day 8 is one of those wonderful surprises that you don't see coming, and that is the savory winter herbal. This is green rooibos, rosemary, peppermint, blue corn flour, and peppermint essence. This stuff is great. You might as well call it rosemary mint tea. And you think, why would that be good? But it's delicious. And again, this is another lively one. I don't know if I would have paired this, right after day 7. I don't know if I would have put it day 7 and day 8, one after the other this way. Because it's 2 wake-up teas. They are herbals, though. No caffeine. That's a really small quibble because this stuff has a lovely scent and a lovely flavor. Every time I drink it, it's kind of like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. It is simply lovely. I believe it was in last year's calendar, which is why I'm saying every time I drink it. Gemma, you say, where's your blather? I got a lot of it, so get comfortable. First, still working on the solar power project. I took a brief hiatus on that. I was getting swamped with salespeople, kind of pestering. So I told them all to take a step back. That I believe I'm going to go back to on Thursday and Friday or possibly Saturday and talk to a few salespeople, but we are working on it. Meanwhile, you may remember that in my family, you have to lead from the front. If I nag people to clean, nothing happens. Well, my son will. Let's put it that way. He's actually very willing. However, I've been cleaning and the boys have been cleaning. And the difference that has made, my house looks much better, I just have to say. We have a ton of presents under the tree as I record this. It's just been wonderful. Meanwhile, I think I told you my passport came home, I said in about a week. No, it was about 5 days, and I did not use any form of expedited processing. I didn't pay extra to have it mailed to me faster. I didn't go through AAA to get it expedited. I did it online. It worked really well. I'm very happy with the outcome. I got my passport photo taken at CVS Pharmacy. They gave me a digital and 2 regular ones. I used the digital. And I've told you already, I've been declaring Christmas early and boxing up things to donate, cleaning out the clutter. Things look so much better, it's disturbing. I service the Roombas. Once a year, I buy them both new brushes. Each Roomba has 3 little brushes. I just chuck the old ones because they're so beaten up. And I clean them out thoroughly. We've done that. And then there was Minerva's private Christmas party, and you can see the pictures in the show notes. I went to a place that is prosaically named catbox.com. They donate to cat shelters, and that was a good recommendation. And I just bought their little holiday box as a try it out. You can see a picture also of my ruby slippers. I'm wearing my red glittery shoes from Tom's there and one of my me-made skirts. And there is Minerva. They sent her a box with her name in it. It said, "Hi, Minerva," and this was the holiday box. You can see her studying the contents, and then she's playing with all the toys. There were 2 treats. One was a dry treat, little nibblies, which she loved. And then there was a wet treat, which is kind of like tuna-flavored slime. So I gave it to her. I couldn't figure out how to give it to her in slow bits, so I just dispensed it into one of her feeding dishes. You can see her there, utterly glutted and sated. Do the toys have catnip in them? I can't tell. But she also got her own special bed for Christmas, which, like every cat ever born, she is simply ignoring right now. We get to the last thing in my list for the blather this week, and now as I'm recording, it's Christmas Day, 2024 at 11:53 a.m. because I had wanted to talk about Jolabokaflod, and I was interrupted last night just as we were about to begin our dinner, which was going to be the celebration of it. So this was a great idea. I want to really recommend this to you as a Christmas tradition. This comes from Iceland, and it literally means Yule Book Flood. It's probably spelled, instead of a D at the end, as I have it, it's probably the letter Ev, which is a letter that was present in English in Anglo-Saxon times and got phased out. But it sounds like a TH sound, a sort of harder TH, like in them. All right, so I think it's Jolabokaflod would be my guess. And this started in the Second World War in Iceland when there was a paper shortage, that for Christmas, everybody gave everybody else a book on Christmas Eve, wrapped as a gift. And then you opened your book and you sat up at night drinking cocoa and reading your book on Christmas Eve. And it's a really great way, I've always thought, to get your family into Christmas, that you read yourself to sleep, basically. So I've mentioned this before, but this year my husband announced on the 22nd, like, yeah, we're going to do that. And I said, we are? So next thing I know, there's books under the tree for me wrapped up. So yesterday, was it yesterday? Yes, yesterday I did the mad rush to get books. And I learned a few things that were very helpful, like on Amazon, you can buy somebody an ebook as a gift, and then you can send it to them in a timed email so they get it at a certain time. So I bought the book my husband said he wanted, and he wanted it as an ebook, and so the link came to me, and then I set up a mailing to him so he would get it on Christmas Eve at 7 p.m. That was one of the cool things I learned. Then, meanwhile, I did go to Barnes & Noble. Now, I haven't been in a bookstore in a long time, and it really shocked me that Barnes & Noble is only half a bookstore now. There's actually a relatively small amount of it is about books. They have everything else, toys and puzzles and films and music, and that's great. Good for them. No criticism there. Because it was just a really fun place to be. They even had Woobles kits, not like I needed any. So I went into Barnes & Noble, and it was just a party to shop there. It was really fun. I bought books for the boys, including one for my husband, and I bought a canister of, I'm sure, ridiculously overpriced exotic hot cocoa powder for my son, so he'd have cocoa that I knew he would like. And of course the first ingredient was sugar. Oh God, at least it was high quality sugar, like there's meaning in that phrase. Anyway, here speaks a keto diabetic, right? Okay, but I bought that. And then I bought these little bookmarker magnets that clip on the top of the page, so we each got one of those. So I took those home and wrapped them, cursing all the way, thinking I'm so done wrapping things, but I wrapped them. And then I had an inspiration, so I put them on the Lazy Susan in the middle of our dining room table, and we kept them there. And my husband, meanwhile, He had got a prime rib because one of the grocery chains near us every Christmas has a prime rib sale. So he got this huge hunk of prime rib. And he cut it into, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 pieces, but he cut the ribs off it. And last night he slow roasted the ribs for about 2 hours, basting them in oil, olive oil, and also, I believe he used, towards the very end, some keto barbecue sauce. So he made those, and then we just had some buttered broccoli, not a very complex dinner. Because we were tearing away like savages with our teeth at those ribs, and they were wonderful. And then after we finished the ribs, we gave the bones to the dogs in their crates. So you have to imagine our Jolabokaflod was accompanied by the sound of insanely happy dogs chewing on big ribs, while Minerva got little bits of the meat. And Minerva went crazy, screaming for the meat all through the meal, pushing herself against my leg and trying to climb up on the table. But remember, she already had her Christmas. This was the aftermath. So then we opened our books, and it was so much fun. I got, from my husband, 4 of the Moomin books. I think the first 4 in the series. Now, these things were around when I was living in Europe. But in those days, really, they were just considered books for very little kids. And I think if you were Finnish, they were a thing. But I think the rest of Europe kind of knew of them, but thought of them. Well, it'd be something like me reading a Sesame Street book as an adult in those days. Now, however, the world has caught on to how cool these books are. They're very, very interesting books. And I will put them in as something I really like next week, I suspect. So I'll talk about them then. And my son gave me Whimsical Stitches, which is by Lauren Espy, who is an insanely good amigurumi designer in crochet. And so I got that too. And oh my gosh, my son got a book about the original translation in English of the Godzilla novels that started the whole craze in Japan. And I gave him the 4th book in a series he's reading called Cibola Burns, and I'll probably talk about that later. And I gave my husband an ebook that he'd asked for, but I also found a book, I believe the author's name is Lemke, I want to say it's Anna Lemke is the author, an MD, called Dopamine Nation. And I'm a big fan of the works of Professor Robert Sapolsky, late of Stanford, retired, who talks about how dopamine affects humans and how his studies in apes led to this. And his book is incredibly boring. It's Why Zebras Don't Have Heart Attacks. I nearly chewed off my right leg to get out of the trap of the first chapter, but if you do what I do for a living, you will never, never forget that book. And then I went to a training with Sapolsky, and he was a brilliant trainer, even if his book is tedious. It looks to me like Dr. Lemke has, I'm guessing, kind of rewritten the book for a more normal audience, like a less professional audience. Anyway, my husband got that, and he really liked it. And then, of course, that was it. We cleaned up dinner, and we all went to our respective beds, and we read. And I'll tell you, my experience of it relates to the strategy that I'm using in this episode and relates to what this whole vacation week has been like. Because I got in bed, and I didn't realize in bed I usually check all the email, make sure there's no fire starting. I mean that literally. I go to an application called Watch Duty that tracks fires, and that season looks like it's pretty over here. Yay. We had rain yesterday. Yay. Okay. So anyway, I check that, I check the mail, just sort of make sure everything's cleaned up for the night. And then, of course, now I've got my tablet in my hand, and I kind of wander around on it. So last night, I made myself read the first chapter of the first published Moomin book, which is Comet in Moominland, I think it's called. Anyway, you'll hear about it next week, I'm pretty sure. And I then went to my tablet. And somewhere in the middle of tableting, I said, what am I doing? Like, this is exactly what I'm not supposed to do tonight. And I thought, well, maybe I should knit. And then I thought, no, maybe I should honor Jolabokaflod. It was a great idea. I sat there, read more Moomin book. The book picks up a lot. And I just relaxed and calmed down. And instead of being up till midnight, as I have been over the last week since I haven't been running, I fell asleep with really heavy eyes at 10:30. I mean, I turned on my audiobook, and I'm serious that I think I got maybe 3 sentences in and seemed to have passed out. So, Jolabokaflod. This is a wonderful tradition. It's a celebration of literacy, It's a chance to start Christmas on Christmas Eve. So instead of being focused, if you have kids, on all the big stuff under the tree, instead we were focused on the books on the table at dinner, and we opened them kind of like dessert, and then we all went to our beds. And I suspect my son didn't read anything in bed because I found all his books on the dining room table this morning. My husband, I found him asleep with his copy of Dopamine Nation next to him. And I just loved reading the Moomin book. Just quietly toned me down and helped me go back to sleep. Now, this is one of those physician heal thyself kind of moments, because I'm the one who's always telling you screens are designed to keep us awake. Well, last night I did the experiment, population n=1 on myself, and it worked. So I highly recommend Jolabokaflod. If you're trying to teach your kids to love books, if you're encouraging your family to read, if you're encouraging your family to wind down at night and turn off screens, this is a new tradition, and I hope I do this for the rest of my life. This was just a wonderful thing. Meanwhile, underneath all this, in the show notes, you'll find the community resources. I was going to organize a craft exchange this weekend, and I decided to back off that because I missed it. They did one actually about 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to back off that till early January, but I am gathering up all my crafty stuff, and that's part of my clearing out of things. So I'm very excited about that. I also have 1-800-JUNK coming out in 2 Fridays. I think that's the 10th. And that's going to clear some things. So we are pretty excited around here. But you can find my community resources, links to the books I've recommended here for knitting and crochet, links to the various places you can buy supplies and interesting things relating to our crafts, and of course links to my favorite skills and techniques, including my own link tree. There's a link to my link tree, and then there's an image of it. It's a photo of it. You can't press on it. All right. And on the calendar, you can see the usual suspects for all the crafty activities that I know of in the Santa Clarita Valley. We are here on my calendar in the middle of Romule, and then I'm looking forward to the Cupid Dash on February 16th. And I still have not sat down and updated the notes for CFR 11, but it is October 11th. How perfect. 2025. The planning is certainly real, but I need the time to sit down and actually organize the notes. So Minerva gets the last word, and you can see a picture of her all curled up on the love seat in my office/study/studio. She is resting up after a really, really happy Jolabokaflod. She didn't get a book, but she's okay. She got toys, and she's happy with that. And hopefully in episode 215, I will talk about the wonders of our Christmas. But we have had simply a wonderful Christmas Eve. I hope everybody had a fantastic Christmas by the time you hear this. I hope all your dreams are coming true, and we're all getting some peace on earth, because we can need it. And beyond that, I'm just going to say, remember, we are a community. When you help the community, you are helping yourself individually. The community supports the individual just as the individual supports the community. On that happy note, everybody stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.